Mew. Okay, I needed something cute and pink, and this was the closest thing I had on hand. Literally, it's right up here. For Momonosuke Part 3. So much Momonosuke. To be fair, I was thinking about this last night. If I ever end up doing like a video discussion about each of the Straw Hats, oh good lord, so many of them are going to be so effing long. And so many different sections in them for like 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3, 4, 79. I don't know. I sort of think, would any of the Straw Hats end up having an episode 79? I'm like, I don't know, Luffy? I don't know, it depends on how I divide up different arcs. But that's a ways away if I ever get to that. And if I ever do end up getting to that, I want to wait and do that like at the end of the series type of thing, of like a culmination of like that character. But that's a ways away. But let's talk about Momonosuke. So, this video is part 3 for Momonosuke. We are going to start with his return to Wano and go all the way up to just before the Battle of Onigashima. So, when we last left Momonosuke, he had ended up staying on Zou for a little while with Inarashi's group. So that way Momonosuke could commune with Zou while the others were off, while Luffy's group was off going to Whole Cake to get Sanji, while Nekomamushi's group was going to go off to go find Marco and ends up by extension Izo. And then Law, Zoro, their group were going, and Kinemon and such, were going to go to Wano to start infiltrating Wano to gather information. Momonosuke stays with Inarashi's group and kind of communes with Zou for a while using his voice of all things, and gets to kind of learn some of that stuff with Zunesha. From there, they eventually get to Wano, and this is before Luffy's group gets there. So they get to Wano, and they end up going to Oden Castle, or Curry Castle, which is where Momonosuke used to live. It's where he actually spent the majority of his life, about 5.5-ish years. They get back there, and of course it's still in ruins and everything else like that, and that's where they're using it as a hideout. That's where Kinemon's group is hiding out. Zoro and Robin, Usopp, and Frankie have like infiltrated different aspects of Wano society to gain information. Law and the Heart Pirates have kind of done the same thing, although Beppo is a bit less conspicuous than the others, to be fair. But they're all, out gathering information, of course, and trying to work on their plan of when they're going to attack Kaido. From there, we have it, of course, that Momonosuke is then eventually reunited with Luffy's group. Luffy, Nami, Sanji, Chopper, Brook, and Carrot. No Pedro. Rest in peace, Pedro. Who, of course, went to Whole Cake, got Sanji, and are now here, having arrived in Wano. So, during this time frame, Momonosuke is there while Kinemon is essentially giving the Straw Hats that had not been given this part of the backstory, the Straw Hats and Carrot, who had not been given this part of the backstory, filling them in essentially on what we then later learn in the Oden flashback. Which is, okay, so we kind of lied to you, not entirely. We didn't give you all the information, but we didn't lie to you. It's a lie of omission, I guess. We didn't tell you that several of us were sent forward in time 20 years. Momonosuke is actually supposed to be 28 years old, but he's only 8 because of being sent forward in time and all this other stuff, and give us essentially the backstory that we then get when we get the Oden flashback. So Momonosuke is like there and learning about this stuff. Possibly also just learning some other stuff about his father that maybe he kind of knew from just stories that the Scabbards would have told him, or that Toki would have told him, as him and Hiyori grew up. But also just to a degree, just learning other stuff about his father a little bit more. beyond just, the legend that was Kozuki Oden, the Chad that he was. And what ends up happening is, so they're getting all of that information, and then Momonosuke is there while Kinemon is explaining to the Straw Hats and such about their plan to raid Onigashima, that it's going to be in about 2 weeks' time. It's going to be the time when, Kaido and Orochi's forces are going to be gathered in essentially the same place on Onigashima. And we're going to, plan to do that. Just the more likelihood of being able to have success there because all of their forces are already there. They also explain that they are going around and trying to keep an eye out for anyone who would be a potential Kozuki supporter, the ones that have like the crescent moon on their ankle. And getting them, the different messages, the little coded message and everything, that explains about when the raid's going to be and everything else like that. So we're getting a lot of that, section taken care of there. This is also when Shinobu gets introduced. Although I think Momonosuke may have met Shinobu already. I don't remember. She at least knows who he is. And from there we have it that Kaido shows up. Luffy and Law had gone down because Kaido had shown up and they were going to go down, and Luffy wants to go fight Kaido and Law is attempting to stop him. Good luck there. It doesn't work. What does end up happening, though, is unfortunately because of Hawkins, Kaido ends up destroying Curry Castle. He ends up Boro breathing it. Thankfully, because of Shinobu, she is able to activate her, it's her Juku no Mi powers, her, ripe fruit powers to, rot the ground, to sink all of them that are still up there into a giant pit in the ground, so that way they are safe from the Boro breath. And it works. This is also, during this time frame, we also see that Momonosuke still has not fully gotten his dragon abilities under control, his devil fruit abilities under control. And he shifts into his little pink dragon form that he has at this point in time. This is, of course, also the same point in time where we learn that Kaido is giant blue dragon. And this is where we start to kind of, I don't know if this is exactly where the conspiracy or the theory started, but some of the theories started about Momonosuke and Kaido clearly are supposed to have the same devil fruit, but Kaido's is blue and Momonosuke's is pink. So how does that work? Type of a thing. So that's kind of what we get there. We also just see that, Momonosuke, whenever he is still just overly scared, stimulated, emotional in that type of a sense, he shifts into his tiny dragon form because he's scared, which is fair. He's 8 years old, and while he has definitely gained a lot of courage in this time frame thus far, between the last time he met Kaido and this point in time, he's still a child, and he is still more than understandably terrified of what is going on. So that's fair. I'm not going to fault the kid for that. I'd be terrified in this situation too. So what we end up seeing next is, so they're all safe. They show, Law runs back, finds out they're safe. Luffy's captured by Kaido's forces. And, they're like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. They all find out that, everybody survived in the hole because of Shinobu's powers, and then they all set off in their own little directions. Momonosuke actually accompanies Kinemon and Inarashi when they go and try to recruit Ashura Doji, because of course Kinemon and Ashura Doji trying to get Shuten Maru, who of course is Ashura Doji, to join their alliance. And Momonosuke is with them, and Ashura says no. Ashura is just, he's like, no, we've lost too much already, I'm not doing that, type of a thing. And then later, obviously, he does rejoin the alliance, or join the alliance after he, kind of explains to Kinemon a bit of what happened 10 years ago with that rebellion. Possibly ends up telling Momonosuke as well at some point in time, but that's neither here nor there. That's not confirmed. But so we kind of see what's happening there. What also ends up happening is we see throughout this whole time frame that Momonosuke is continuing to practice his his swordsmanship. And we see him training near Amagasa Village during this time frame. And we see him and Tama getting to know each other. Assumedly, Tama has been explained that he is Kozuki Momonoske, heir to Wano, rightful shogun of Wano type of a thing. I believe she has been, and then that's why he keeps getting annoyed whenever she doesn't call him Lord Momonosuke or Young Master or anything like that. And she's just like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. You're a kid like I am. Which is just hilarious. I love their dynamic, and I hope it continues. Even, in present time frame, I hope their friendship continues. Because she is one of the few people who knows that Momonosuke is not legitimately mentally 28 years old. He's still 8 years old. He's still a child. So we get that. We also have it that she is just asking him about Hiyori, about his sister. And Momonosuke says that he believes that she is still alive, but he's not intended to reunite with her until the war is over. Because he is more worried about the fact of she'd be all grown up by now, and she may have, disguised herself as something. To be fair, he is correct. She has disguised herself as Komurasaki, and she's not necessarily hiding. She's, one of the most famous people in Wano, but her true identity is hidden by having this guise and persona that she has as Komurasaki, which I'll go over much more when I discuss Hiyori. But Momonosuke does, remember his sister. He still very much loves her, of course, and he misses her a lot, I'm sure. But he's like, yeah, I don't really want to find her until after the war is over, because if we expose her and then we fail, then she will be hurt too. She will be hunted down just the way that we are. Which is very good, so I do like that. I do like that he is, considering that when it comes to his sister. He's like, well, I'd rather hope that she is out there safe somewhere, and at least if something happens and we fail, she can hopefully somehow survive. She'll still be somewhat safe, hopefully. So we get that. And we just have, Momo and Tama just have, nice little friendship that starts to develop here. Later that night, when Momonosuke, Tama, Chopper, and Kiku are, kind of doing some training in the forest and just walking through the forest, they end up hearing a very big crash, and they end up making their way out to out on Curry Beach, and that is where they find unconscious and revealed to be amnesiac Charlotte Linlin. And Momonosuke is rightfully terrified. Tama and Kiku have no idea who the F she is, and Chopper is also rightly terrified. Big Mom wakes up and they find out that she has no memory of who she is, so they're like, it's more an initiative by Tama and Kiku, and they take her to Okabore town, where Suru ends up going through and they help her get her hair all done, and they give her some oshiruko and everything like that. And this is the big version of Big Mom as Olin that would be really nice if she could legitimately have become, where she, I've talked about that before, where it about Linlin. But of course, what ends up happening here is the straw. They're like, okay, well, how can we use this to our advantage? And I believe that it is, I think it's a combination of Kiku and Tama, excuse me, that come up with the idea of like, well, she could help us get Luffy out of Udon prison. So they essentially trick Lin Lin into helping them go to Udon prison. She beats up one of the Wanazami, the giant crocodile things. And then, to be fair, Tama could have literally just tamed the dang thing. But Lin Lin doesn't let that happen. She just, beats up the crocodile and makes it work for them. And we all see them, all 5 of them riding on the Wanazami toward Udon prison, because their intention is to try to get there so that way they can try to rescue Luffy. And by extension, the other prisoners there and stuff like that are possible allies to the Kozuki clan. On the way there, we have that Momonosuke is still practicing, and we hear him saying Tsunachi, Tsunachi, as he keeps like beating his sword on top of the crocodile. Be nice to the crocodile. Be nice to the crocodile, Momo. And Kiku actually scolds him. She's like, please do not use that word. She's also, where did you learn that word, my young lord? And he's like, oh, well, I heard it from Zoro, because he said that it was something that an old man in his village taught him to say, back in the East Blue. This is where more fire gets added to the thing of like, how does Zoro know this word? This is a word from Wano. And the way that it kind of gets translated for Tsunachi is, it is kind of like YOLO, like the you only have only one life to live type of a thing. That type of a thing of just like, screw it, like hold my beer, and jumps off the cliff or something like that. It's this like rallying type of a thing for like now or never, or something along those lines is the way that it's kind of done, but it's a very crude way of saying it in this regard. So that's why Kiku's like, how do you know that word? Please don't use that word. That is unbecoming of someone of your status. You are the rightful shogun of Wano, Odin's son, all this stuff. You should not be using that word. And Mom was like, oh, okay, then I won't. I was a little bit like, okay, fine, I won't. That night, I believe it's both Tama and Momonosuke end up just falling asleep on like Kiku's lap on their way toward Udon. And then the next day, when they do get to Udon, Lin Lin just like, because they've told her they have Oshiruko, and they will if you take the Oshiruko, we can share it with everybody back in Okabore town. And that's why Lin Lin is helping them, because she's amnesiac and very nice when she's amnesiac, because she kind of reverts back to how she was as like a little kid on Elbath. There's like a whole other thing there where it's just like, what if Big Mom hadn't been been made cuckoo by Stroyson, type of a thing, or if she didn't have her hunger pangs, or that type of a thing, that type of a situation there. And what ends up happening is Lin Lin just rips, literally like tearing pieces of bread apart, just like rips her way through the door of the gates of Udon prison, and just makes her way through, causes a ton of chaos inside. Kiku and Chopper follow them in and tell Momonosuke and Tama to wait outside because that's safer for them. And Big Mom just kind of rampages through the prison, breaking down so many of the walls and doors and everything else like that. Has fights with Queen, inadvertently results in Luffy and Hirogoro getting out of the Sumo Inferno, and Luffy learning more about his Ryuo and everything else like that, and saving Kid and all this other stuff, Kid and Killer and all of this. So we're getting a lot of that. Is like all of that's happening at the same time. There's the plague bombs going off because of Queen and everything else like that, using his plague bullets and all of that. And they're doing all that, and eventually Queen, along with the now unconscious, completely wrapped in Sea Prism Sewn Chains Big Mom, they leave and head off toward Onigashima. And, Tama and Momonosuke have to, like, sneak their way inside the prison, or else they're going to get caught by the beast pirates, which is not good. And eventually they end up making their way back into the prison itself. And while all of this is going on, all of the chaos is happening, and eventually it results in, this is where Luffy ends up, Luffy has been infected by the plague bullets by, getting, touching the prisoners, and has, like, over-infected himself, and of course Chopper has to heal him. We have the great moment where, the great, I believe it was a double-page spread, where you had Luffy, Kiku, Hirogoro, Raizo, and Chopper all together, and Kawamatsu all together in, like, the big circle moment, with them getting ready to face off against Kaido's forces, against the Beast Pirates and everything. So we have that. And then, we have Luffy, like, essentially winning over the hearts of the prisoners of Udon Prison, and defeating Babanuki. So we have all of that happening. From there, we have that Luffy and Momonosuke and such are, reunited in this. And Momonosuke then ends up having to face the prisoners. And this is a very big moment for Momonosuke, because this is one of the milestones that he gets past, mostly just based on the fact that he is Kozuki Oden's son. Not because of anything that he himself has done, or his own courage. What ends up happening is, of course, the prisoners recognize him, or based off of, because, like, Hirogoro supposedly met Momonosuke and Hiyori when they were children, and would recognize Momonosuke, even 20 years later, since Momonosuke has not really aged. And, we have, Kawamatsu and Raizo and the others are all there. And we have this boy, Momonosuke, who is, showing up in front of the citizens that are being held captive in the prisoner mines. And what ends up happening is Luffy and Momonosuke are kind of bickering, and then he's forced to appear in front of the liberated prisoners. They kind of force him to do that, to, like, gain their trust more, and, like, say, yes, we have, like, Momonosuke here, we have the heir, type of a thing. And the prisoners end up bowing to him. The prisoners bow before Momonosuke as their confidence in the Kozuki family is starting to be restored. Yes, part of this is essentially them, vowing their loyalty to him and to the Kozuki family, but it's also partially just based on, like, their best bits of hope left over, their last bits of hope left over from everything that happened 20 years ago with the Hour of Legend and everything else like that. And presumably a lot of the people who are in these prisoner mines, specifically Hirogoro and the other Yakuza members, the other Yakuza leaders that we see throughout, in this bit, they were there because they opposed Kaido and Orochi. They fought against Kaido and Orochi. They were supportive of Oden and his rightful claim to the throne. And they ended up being locked up here. Lots of the other prisoners here are people who probably did the same thing, or just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, or other ones who maybe had, like, minor infractions against the law, but still ended up being captured and taken and thrown into Udon Prison, where they are essentially left to rot. Because a lot of them have been here for, like, 20 years or more, or something like that. And this is Momonosuke, this possible last-ditch effort to get Kozuki family back in power and liberate Wano, And this is what Momonosuke represents at this point in time. And I believe it's Momonosuke just has like this moment where he's just like, they're not swearing to me because of who I personally am. They are swearing to me because of who my father was. Because my father was Kozuki Oden. Not because of anything that I have done. And that's a very heavy moment for Momonosuke because he's seeing all these prisoners who have been in prison for who knows how long. Ranging from a couple of days like Luffy all the way up to possibly even longer than 20 years. And Momonosuke's like, I have not given them any reason to believe in me. Luffy showed them his strength and his determination, and the others that were here showed them their determination. Even Tama, with her, kibi fruit, was able to, tame Babanuki and other members of the Beast Pirates that were there that were the gifters. She was able to tame them, which is still demonstrating something that she can do. And Momonosuke didn't really end up doing anything. He didn't stand up to Queen. He didn't stand up to any of the Beast Pirates that were there. And he's just kind of having this moment of like, am I really ready to do this? Am I really the one who should be leading them into possibly certain death, essentially, when it comes to fighting against Kaido and Orochi and their forces and the plan to go to the Fire Festival and everything on Onigashima. So that is essentially kind of where Momonosuke is coming from with that. That worry there. Which is fair. It's a completely valid fear. He is an 8-year-old child who not 6 months ago watched his family get ripped apart and has been majorly traumatized already. So again, I keep harping on that, and I don't blame the kid at all. But I also keep harping on that because of the moment that will happen later in the next episode, in the next video of this, where I discuss when he is taken to Onigashima, and where he finally claims what he is in front of Kaido and in front of Orochi, when I get to that. But that'll be next time. Moving forward, we have it that, of course, Momonosuke is there where they liberate all of the prisoners, and they'll end up heading back to Amagasa Village. Momonosuke and the others head back to Amagasa Village for essentially like the next week or so, next 2 weeks-ish or so, while they're all getting everything ready for the attack. They're all heading off to the different regions to get the ships ready, to get the weapons, to get other supplies, to gather up other allies, and everything else like that, all under Kaido's nose. All under Kaido and Orochi's nose, essentially. And Momonosuke continues to practice, works on his swordsmanship. We also end up finding out that, this is where Momonosuke does learn that Hiyori is alive. And, because Kawamatsu and Zoro show up because they both ran into Hiyori, former Komurasaki, up in the Ringo region. And, Zoro helped protect her from Orochi, from Kamazo, killer, and such. And then was able to, she promised him Enma as essentially a trade for having Shusui return to them, to return to the grave of Ryuma. So we have that. And Momonosuke is there while this little exchange, not while this exchange is taking place, he's not there, but they, Zoro and Kawamatsu return. And they explain, we found Hiyori, she is alive, and she's in the Ringo region. They mention nothing about her being Komurasaki. To be fair, I don't know if either of them know who Komurasaki is to begin with. But that's probably a good thing, because, as I have mentioned, had they said anything about her being Komurasaki, Kanjuro would have told Orochi would have known that Komurasaki was alive, and he would have known that she was Hiyori, and therefore everything goes to shit when she shows up on Onigashima and is there to trick and defeat Orochi. So you get the idea there. From there, we have it that Momonosuke then ends up receiving Ame no Habakiri, which is in the hands of Tenguyama Hitetsu, who is, of course, also Sukiyaki. Kozuki Sukiyaki, his own grandfather, and he doesn't know that yet. And Sukiyaki can't tell him that, because that would be like this big reveal. It's not going to be a good idea. And would just add more layers of danger to what's going on. So Zoro is given Enma as Kawamatsu's word, as this is what happened. So that's what happens there. And then, Momonosuke has Ame no Habakiri. But he decides to decline it for now. He's not ready for it. He's like, no, I'm not ready to have Ame no Habakiri yet. I'm not worthy yet of my father's sword. From there, Zoro gets the blade. Momonosuke is watching as this is all happening and everything. And then, of course, we have it that they're all just still... Other discussions are going on. It's like 2 weeks, several days later or so is when it is time for them to all head to Onigashima and head off for the raid. So Momonosuke, along with Shinobu and the scabbards that are there, are heading off to Tokage Port for where they are going to make preparations and be ready to head off. And of course, we have the cute bit where Tama made the casa hats for them, all of the straw hats for them to wear as they move across Wano, so they're protected from the sun. I love that. Tama's great. As you've already seen, since I've already discussed her. So they go through that. They make their way to Tokage Port. Unfortunately, when they get there, they find none of their allies there. There are no other ships except some little dinghy of a boat. And they're all just are like, what are we supposed to do? And Momonosuke is just worried about this because he's like, oh no, what happened? And all the scabbards get into this little dinky boat, preparing to set sail for Onigashima themselves to just essentially attack Kaido and Orochi. Momonosuke stays on the shore with Shinobu, with her kind of holding him back so he can't run after them. And they set sail. However, they're setting sail so that because it's like we survived, and they have to we have to repay the rest of our essentially life debt to Odin. So their intention is to, cost of our lives or not, we're going to go and we're going to try to take down Odin. Or take down Odin, that was wrong. Avenge Odin, take down Kaido and Orochi. And what ends up happening is, of course, on the shore, we find out that, Kanjuro in the boat is an ink clone. Kanjuro is actually the traitor. Real Kanjuro is over on the shore, attacking Momonosuke and Shinobu. Not good. Not good at all. So what ends up happening is Kanjuro, the real Kanjuro, jumps out, attacks Momonosuke and Shinobu, attacks Shinobu with like these drawn snakes that he has, captures Momonosuke. Kawamatsu shows up on the shore, tries to fight against Kanjuro. Kanjuro ends up escaping, has Momonosuke, flies away on his crane that he draws, and they're flying off. While that is happening, Denjiro and his alliance, along with the Straw Hats and their crews and such like that, the Straw Hats and the Heart Pirates and the Kid Pirates and the Minks and everything, they're all showing up at the same time frame. So Kanjuro is seeing what's going on here. Him and Momonosuke are flying away on the crane, and he's mocking the legacy of Momonosuke's parents to Momonosuke and of his own cowardice, because it's like, you're just a coward, Momonosuke. You are just a child, and I have known that this whole time. You cannot possibly lead this pitiful alliance toward anything that resembles victory. And Momonosuke, very much showing how brave he has become, shouts out, and like we have it that like the Straw Hats and such are like, oh no, Momonosuke's been captured essentially, and they're like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And Momonosuke shouts out, everyone, don't mind me. That is what the enemy wants. I promise I will manage alone. So please strike down both Kaido and Orochi. Protect Wano. And he's like shouting this at the top of his lungs. And we see this pride come over Luffy, the Straw Hats, and the Scabbards. Because, and like this is just even a little while after what happened at Udon Prison, where Momonosuke really didn't have anything to say to the prisoners. And this is him having this reveal that Kanjuro, this man that he has known most of his life and has been one of his main protectors, is actually a traitor. And, you know, has been mocked by Kanjuro now. And Momonosuke is like, I need to be brave. I know that they're trying to use me as bait, and the others just need to focus on the actual plan that we have made. Well, my life is important. Them actually trying to defeat Kaido and being able to, and having this moment and having our forces is far more important. And that's what Momonosuke means when he's just like, don't mind me. That's exactly what the enemy wants. Just focus on the plan. You will be fine. I can take care of myself. And like Luffy's smiling with pride at this. The other Straw Hats are all smiling with pride at this. The other Scabbards, while they are all of them are all still worried. Even like Law is probably kind of worried about him. He's like trying to hide it, but like I'm sure like Beppo, the others in the background, are like, oh no, Momonosuke's in trouble. Brave boy, type of a thing. But like they're all actually very proud of him at this point in time, because he is not the same little, you know, particularly from Luffy's perspective, Momonosuke is not this at the moment. He is not acting like the same little sniveling dragon eel thing that Luffy found down in the trash in the trash bin in Punk Hazard, which is actually a very good comparison here, because like Luffy finds, you know, that's where he finds Momonosuke. That is the first interaction that we have with Momonosuke, is down in this trash bin, because at that point in time, to a degree, from Momonosuke's perspective, he feels like he is trash, because he has no idea what purpose he is going to serve. He knows that they need to try to avenge his parents and his country and save his country, but while he's sitting in this trash bin on Punk Hazard, he just feels like he is completely and utterly powerless and completely and utterly worthless. And he has now been turned into a dragon, and he has no idea how to turn back or use any of his abilities. So at that point in time, he feels like trash. At this point in time, he has like gained so much confidence in his allies. Yes, he has seen what Luffy and the Straw Hats and Law and his crew and such are capable of. He has seen to a degree what the Minks are capable of in their fighting ability and everything else like that. And so he sees all of this. And he's also starting to realize what he himself is capable of. And he's like, I'm still just a kid, but I can still do my best to support and motivate and do what I can from my own position within this alliance. I'm a kid, I'm not expected to fight, and I still have all these adults, essentially, that are trying to protect me and keep me safe and keep me from getting hurt. And I guess that that's their job, but they have to go and fight this war, and I can't. That'll be shifted, of course, a bit later this same night. But that's what we have there. As opposed to the comparison of the fact that when we first meet Kanjuro, he is sitting in a trash compactor, scrap pile in Dressrosa, because he is trash, because he is a traitor. And he has done nothing but be a traitor to the Scabbards and Oden and the Kozuki clan and everything else like that for the last 20-something years that he's been around them. He's been nothing but a traitor to them, even though he has put on this front of being a friend to them. So there's this great comparison there between, like, Luffy finding Momonosuke in this, you know, trash pile, in the garbage chute and garbage pile on Punk Hazard, and Luffy doesn't think he's useless, and Momonosuke proves throughout the course of even that arc alone that he's not useless, and then very much throughout the course of the Wano arc proves that he is not useless. Whereas Kanjuro, we find him in the trash compactor on Dressrosa, and even then, he is pretending to be a garbage artist in order to trick the Scabbards, in order to trick Kinemon and the others, as he has for the last whole time that they've known him. And he goes and, we think he's an ally this whole time, rubbish artist, but he's at least somewhat trying to be useful and everything. And then at this point in time, when he is revealed to be the traitor, we of course find out that he has been nothing but trash this entire time. He's supposed to be in the garbage pile because that is what he is. Because he is trash. Because he is a traitor who betrayed his friends, who did nothing but showed him kindness and love and gave him a home and gave him family and gave him trust. And he has done nothing but betray them by, behind their own backs and everything. So there's that very good comparison there that I really only just thought of now. But we have that. Also, the other thing that I'm sure is affecting Momonosuke during this time frame is, as I went over with the Kiku video and even the Tama video, none of them actually end up seeing Yasuie's execution. Because it's already been finished by the time they arrive at Udon prison. The execution has already taken place, so they don't get to view the execution as it is happening, as it is being played on the screens and broadcasted all over Wano. They don't get to see it. They find out about it later, and I'm sure Kiku is very heartbroken about it, and Momonosuke was probably quite heartbroken about it. And I mean, Tama really wouldn't have known who Yasuie was, but she probably still would have been sad that this guy died. And then, of course, she ends up becoming friends with Toko later, type of a thing. But, Momonosuke would have known who Yasuie was because he's met Yasuie when he was younger. He's known Yasuie for a while, when he was a child. Or at least known of him, if not known him. And so that's probably also, he has seen the sacrifice that Yasuie has made, or heard about the sacrifice that Yasuie has made, and he's like, that is the ultimate sacrifice that someone can give. And I think at this point in time, given the circumstances, I do believe Momonosuke would be ready to make that sacrifice, the same sacrifice that Yasuie made. He does not want to, obviously, but he wants to live. He wants to be able to lead, Wano into the future just the way that his father had wanted to. Free Wano, open the borders, all of that. So we have that. But so kind of what ends up happening is, of course, Momonosuke is captured. He's taken by Kanjuro, and they are flying off toward Onigashima on the crane, and Momonosuke is telling the others to not worry about him, to fight on, to go forward without worrying about him. He'll take care of himself. Which is where we will pick up when I get to the next video for this. So, that's what I have here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!